want to just work with people because they have a lot of money to spend. And I don't want, I'm never going to like throw caviar and diamonds at everything. That's just not who I am as a person, and it's not who I am as a designer.
Welcome to the Think Splendid YouTube channel. My name is Lynn Stevens, and I'm the founder and CEO of Think Splendid, where we provide business strategy for luxury wedding and hospitality brands. In celebration of 15 years in business, I'm sitting down with 20 wedding industry leaders from around the world to discuss the realities of owning an event business in 2020. These splendid conversations are honest, candid, and authentically optimistic. In this episode, I chat with Joy Proctor, a destination wedding designer based in Portland, Oregon, and the co-founder of the Say Their Names Memorial grassroots movement. You may know Joy as the planner and designer behind Sophie Turner and Joe Jonas's Destination Wedding, but Joy has strong feelings about not being pigeonholed as a celebrity wedding professional. In this episode, Joy and I talk about those feelings, as well as the impact of confidentiality agreements on your marketing, what she's been focusing on during the pandemic, the role of design and social justice, and showing up as your whole multifaceted self. Here's our conversation. Enjoy.
Well, it's so nice to see you after so long.
I know. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really good. I think, this year is just a whole situation, but I feel even though what happened yesterday was just so heavy, I feel hopeful in some way. So I think I'm doing good.
What are you feeling hopeful about?
I think in the beginning we were also affected by like this loss of life, and the loss of life was so heavy and this huge change. I mean, having to be home, and I didn't think about business for a while there, but after a few months and knowing that I had to shift all these weddings, it was so clear that like this is changing everything for everybody in a multitude of ways. And then my emotions about my business and loss of business and like changing everything was like, I wanted to be honest about that on social media, but I don't think anybody else was, and then I talked to a couple folks and they're like, well, gosh, be careful. If you do that, there's potential clients on there who are going to see it and think that you're going to go out of business and then not want to hire you. But in some way it's like that community that we have on social media with other vendors. Like I wanted to be honest and say, dude, I'm struggling. I don't know what to do with myself. And there were so many people immediately who turned in that like pivot coach, help you do this, buy my course, it's 50% off. And I just felt there's no way I'm doing that right now. It's like nobody has any money to do this, and I'm not going to pretend that I know how to get somebody out of this because I have no idea how to get out of this, And so I was just like, And I think that's when I just went into like, what am I feeling emotionally? And as a result, started like a couple initiatives to figure out how can I use my skills, and my relationships in this industry to help people in the industry and outside of the industry who need it right now, because I'm twiddling my thumbs at home. I might as well be doing something,
Right.
So that felt good. It felt good to be able to do something, but it didn't give me a better sense of what my business was doing. That's for
Right.
sure.
Well, I think too, having been a business consultant for so long and in that B2B space, it's also gotten more saturated, especially with the explosion of online courses, which I think online courses can be hugely beneficial. So I'm not anti those, but I think the people who are trying to pivot into the business consulting space are going to be in for a rude awakening, because if money's not coming in for your target market, they don't have the money to spend on you. It's going to keeping their employees, if they're able to do that, covering their mortgage, covering their warehouse rent, all of that. Like, it's not going to someone who also has never lived through a pandemic.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I can help people navigate recessions, but I can't necessarily help people navigate how to handle government leadership who interferes with the disease control center. Right? Like, that is what took me by surprise. I didn't expect much out of him, but I did not expect him to interfere.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And people know. They're like, you've never been through this either. Like, not to me personally, but just in general, they're not hiring these coaches. And I know people are just trying to do whatever to get money
Yeah.
in the door to feed their families. And everyone is under a lot of stress right now.
Yeah.
A lot.
Exactly.
So I get it. I get why that seems like the wise approach. But honestly, designing backgrounds for people's Zooms might be more financially lucrative than
Good call. You're totally right.
trying to sell a course right now. That's my opinion.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. I agree with you. It's like, I think for all of us, we're just doing what we can. So I'm definitely with you that I don't hold anything against anybody. I just see that it's really hard to sell yourself as somebody who knows how to fix something that none of us have fixed, and that we don't even know where this goes, right? It's like we're kind of in it. We have no idea what the next 6 months, year plus will be like. So yeah.
Right. I feel like under any other president from either party,
Yeah.
this would have been handled correctly.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Like, that has nothing to do with what party they are. I just feel like anyone else with like a shred of respect for accountable leadership would have handled this correctly.
Yeah, exactly. You're totally right. Isn't that the sad thing? I mean, it's so interesting because I've noticed, and this is probably something you know tons about, but I was thinking about that and thinking about how this affected our country and how other countries dealt with it, and how that in turn continues to affect us wedding professionals, because all of my work is destination. And so if I want to be working in Europe, where I've been working for the last 2 years primarily, I can't first, I guess now you've got the ability to go in if you can prove that it's an emergency, but basically I can't go work there. I can't do the things. And those vendors can't get the clients. I mean, a lot of European vendors are working with clients from Asia or clients from the US. I mean, because the Europeans are generally not spending the money that we're spending. And it's just so crazy to see how this has been handled here has affected our industry, destination industry, like tremendously.
I think that was the wake-up call for a lot of people who depend on the destination market.
Yeah.
Because before they were like, this is terrible. I'm sad people are hurt. I'm going to wear my mask and carry on business as usual as much as I can. Mm. And the countries that I work in are handling this better, so everything's going to be fine. Yeah. And I kept saying, there's like public health things that are going to come down and we are going to get banned, right? Like, I'm like, Americans are going to start being banned by countries. And then sure enough, the EU banned it. And there are some people there now, and I don't think they're being responsible on social media. How? Like, I'm like, you need to tell people how you're there, because public facing, the rule is still the EU is not allowing American citizens in. And this clearly is an emergency, planning this wedding for next year. Yeah. So if you got an exemption, you should probably say that, because it's really rubbing a lot of people the wrong way.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that, and I was like, wow, how did you get in there? I think you're totally right. It's like it's our responsibility. I have not done that, but for anybody who does that, it's totally their responsibility to communicate honestly about the actual urgency. Because let's be honest, it's like we talked about, it's like what we're doing right now is setting us up, and what we did 6 months ago is setting us up for the future. But what we do now is too, and this could easily, should a few of those things get out, because let's be honest about how the media has portrayed weddings now as a result of what's happened here in our country, and people disregarding these, mandates, and having these huge weddings and having people die. So just a little bit of like bad media on any folks who are going there right now and not really talking about it the right way could potentially set us up for bad things to happen in the future.
Yeah, I agree. And weddings get a bad rap in normal times.
Yeah.
I really hate the narrative of like the big bad media, because I don't believe that. But the media does love to paint weddings as selfish and a waste of money and extravagant and, let them eat cake type of attitude. That's when things are normal.
Yeah,
so
true.
When people go to a wedding and now it's like, what, 11 people have died from the wedding in Maine.
Yeah,
who
exactly.
weren't even at the wedding. They just caught it from people who attended. That doesn't help. And I understand, again, I get the need to provide for your family. And a lot of people, I don't know, it's hard.
It is.
It's very hard.
It is. Yeah, it is. It's so interesting. Like I'm always I love what you do because like even before this, you have so many like unique insights into what's happening. And it must be, I understand how this is like an interesting time for you because your crystal ball, that's not just like some like random crystal ball. It's like all this research and all that, whatever you throw in your ball, whatever those things are. But like it's I don't know how you deal with this right now. I'm curious to see what you think about the future of events. I mean, everybody, it's like I moved everything to next year, which was work in itself, obviously. I mean, that's like the truth for a lot of us. And there was that question of like, people changing their contracts, and do you charge your clients for this additional work to change and to move, or do you say, my goodness, it's like they didn't expect this, and I should do it. Total another conversation probably to have about all of that. But it's like, are we even going to be safe for this next year? Or are we going to see people just as a result of this next year, the next, all decide to have smaller weddings, even once perhaps this immediate threat is gone? And I'm interested to see what your crystal ball says about that, and about how this changes, like what you talked about, like this let them eat cake idea, that people think weddings are frivolous, and that people who would have normally spent whatever or done whatever, maybe they'll still spend that, but they don't want it to look like that, so they'll change things. And is
Right.
that something that continues for the foreseeable future? What does your crystal ball say about that one?
A couple things that I see happening. One, I think people want to celebrate. We're already seeing that, right?
Yeah.
Like we've seen that on Instagram, people traveling safely and people traveling not safely, which I think are two separate things.
Yeah.
And we've seen I think people do want to celebrate. They're itching to get out of the house. They're itching to get normalcy again. I think we'll see a big spike in kids' parties because parents want to make this up for their kids this year. It's so weird. And how do you explain this when you don't really understand it? But also, I think that previous recessions can inform how the piece about optics.
Yeah.
And the people who do spend a lot of money, like in 2008, they still spent a lot of money, but they either didn't want it to look like they spent a lot of money.
Yeah.
So that over the top, lush, organic, flowy, floral, and greenery decor that's been so popular for the last several years.
Yeah.
And is very expensive to produce because it takes a lot of labor and product and even just behind the scenes product of Oasis and all that to produce. That might get cut back on because that looks, a lavish ceiling installation looks lavish. People look at that and they're like, oh, that costs money. And we know that. So
yeah,
I think we're going to see the design go back to looking simple, like we did in 2008. And for the luxury end, I think too that clients are going to require NDAs, the clients who are spending a lot of money, much more so than they have in the past. And I think probably everyone who's worked at the luxury level for a long time or for a while has signed at least one NDA and has a wedding they can't show. And I know a lot of people at that level have a lot of work they can't show. So they do depend quite heavily on the rest of the weddings to be able to use for marketing and portfolio and all of that.
Exactly.
And if you're not allowed to share that for your portfolio because your client doesn't want the media to run a story on how they spent $500,000 for a birthday, like they're not, you don't get to use that work. Yeah. And it's also can brand you out of touch, even if the NDA is not there. It can brand the wedding pros as out of touch of, look at this lavish wedding. While we're at the highest unemployment rate and people are still being laid off and made redundant and especially in hospitality. Like there were more announcements made this past week by the big hotel brands of layoffs. And it's hard for a lot of people right now. So people don't want to be reminded that some people have it great while they don't. So even though people are going to want to celebrate, I think they're going to have the parties.
Yeah.
I think they're going to spend money, but they're not going to want it to look like they're spending money. And I think they're going to want the wedding pros to keep their mouths shut and will contractually require that.
You're totally right. That's not something I had considered. I think you're absolutely right about that. That's so interesting. You know, this is a little segue, but I also felt during all of this, I mean, so many things have happened this year. So the pandemic was like the biggest one, right? But then as a result, I mean, there have been a lot of other things that happened. I guess, I mean, thinking about the social justice movement and the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, that's happened. I also felt for a while there that people would feel that it was also not okay to be, you know, in the midst of this very heavy, very urgent situation, people wouldn't feel like they can, and I saw this on social media too, right? That people felt like it wasn't okay to just be like business as normal, even though it wasn't as normal, but pandemic normal, right? There was another shift there.
Right.
And I don't know how that necessarily affects what people choose for their weddings and whatnot, but definitely for other people were probably already afraid of saying, I'm going to this event. You know, I don't think anybody wanted to show themselves like, I'm at so-and-so's house for dinner. Like, you shouldn't be at their house. There was so much of that, you know, but then I feel like it's so interesting because there was a little bit of a shift with this because all of a sudden we had tens of thousands of people in the streets protesting. And being from Portland, here in Portland, that was true for us, and it has not stopped to this day. People are wearing masks, but I'll be honest, they're not all social distancing. But it's interesting because that's been like this new wave or new like added layer to this social like phenomenon of the pandemic, which is like for these particular things, people will break their normal like behavior because they believe this is important enough, and weddings are not important enough, but social justice is. So that's like been a really interesting thing. And you know, like I said, I've seen that a lot here in Portland. I think for me, as I said earlier, just figuring out how I could aid that, I feel like protesting is not the thing that was like, protesting is not something for everyone. Whether they believe in the cause or not everybody wants to be out in the street. But I realized there are a lot of folks at home who will spend money, who will donate, or who will give their time. You know, and that kind of ended up being what I saw a lot of in the wedding industry, is a lot of folks then picking up, you know, from this place of like, I don't know what to do with my business and I'm not sure what's happening, and what should I be working on, and moving forward with this like super important, urgent issue pressing our country, which was social justice. And that's like exactly what I did and what I'm still doing. And it's given me a lot of purpose. And I guess in some way it's also made me realize that like every skill I've had or I've built in the events industry is like, not that I'm thinking of pivoting, but like you know, I could do it because all of these things like, you know, project management and all of these other things that I've built, I can use and I have used in this way. And I've seen other people realize that too. And so I'm not going to pass too much judgment on things like QAnon and other things, but I've seen people just
I will. I'll pass all the judgment on that.
Go ahead.
It is ruining our country. It is warping people's minds.
Yes. So it's
I think it does give people a sense of control during a time when everything's out of their control and they want a way to explain it.
Yeah.
But if you really look at what it's saying, there is so much racism baked into it. There is so much misinformation and not misunderstandings, just straight up trying to confuse people.
Yeah.
And no, I think it's terrible. And I think it's gone mainstream very fast.
So fast.
And it is very scary to me. So you don't have to pass judgment on it, but I will all day long.
You know what it is? It's like this child trafficking piece that is the piece where I saw so many people. So all of these, a lot of event industry people I saw either take up, social justice, and some of them took it up kind of like, this is a thing and whatever. And some people really took it up. And then some people who kind of took it up as soon as this thing came along were just like, zoom, this is my thing, And so I'm sure that's not just the events industry. It's like, it's everybody, because everybody has more time in a variety of ways to be focused on their
right.
thing.
That I do have some experience with. So a lot of my volunteer work for the last couple decades has been on the issues of orphan care, and that includes adoption, that includes education, that includes foster care, all of that. So human trafficking of children is a big issue with international adoption. It's a big issue. It has been an issue for a long time. Anywhere there's a concentration of money, greed and corruption is going to run rampant. And adoption costs so much to prevent trafficking. Like, that's why, because then it's obviously a barrier to being able to have access to these vulnerable children. But also, when it costs that much, there's people who adopt kids and who were told their parents had both died, which is referred to as a total orphan if both parents are dead. And then they found out the parents were alive and thought they were placing their kid in this children's home while they got a better job. So that has been happening for a long time, at least 20 years minimum, a long, long time. So those are very real issues.
Yeah.
And when this crazy nutcase conspiracy came out that Wayfair was hiding children in their cabinets and shipping them off because they named a cabinet Amelia, and shipping it off for $10,000, and smart people bought into this, I think people realized, oh, I should be passionate about something.
Yeah.
And this spoke to them. And it is a very genuine cause that has genuine issues. And there are ways to volunteer with organizations that have been doing this work for a long time.
Yeah.
But some of the even trafficking hotlines said, please stop calling us about this because the real calls can't get through. I really hope an investigative journalist gets to the bottom of who's behind it, because I think it's going to be a rude awakening for people when they realize just how heavily they were duped by this.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely agreed. Oh, it's an interesting time. It's a super, super interesting time. You're so right about that I think people felt like they needed to be involved in something, and they all of a sudden had all this time to be involved in something. And of course, you're so right. It's like, it's heart-wrenching to imagine that this, that anybody could take advantage of children, and so I can understand why people felt that. But let's be honest, it's like there's a whole segment of the country that's getting, I don't know where they're what their media is doing, but there's, it's just not facts. Like, it's not factual, it's not scientific. And so there's like this larger problem that it's so easy for all this crazy stuff to get out and for people to take it as fact. It's just, it's really scary.
It's very scary. And I've seen people who I thought knew better fall for it.
Yeah.
And I, again, the empathetic side of me says, I understand people are feeling way out of control more than usual, and they're trying to make sense of a situation. And some of them are realizing for the first time that the government is not on their side.
Yeah.
Welcome to everyone else's life. But it's, and that's really scary because, there is a white man is president, and he is not protecting white people from COVID. And for some of them, it's the first time they realize that the system isn't working for them. And it's the first time they've ever experienced that.
Yeah.
And it offers easy solutions with, again, legitimate issues wrapped up in lies. So human trafficking, legitimate issue.
Yeah.
What QAnon is pushing as human trafficking, full conspiracy. Those are not the real issues attached to this very legitimate issue that it would be great if more people got truly involved in. I would love to hear about the Say Their Names Memorial and the concept behind that and what prompted you to do that. And I know that some women in Texas did one for their local area and neighbors complained it got taken down.
Yeah.
And if you could get into that, because I do think that was a good use of your talents, and it is putting your energy towards something that matters right now.
Totally. Yeah, so that was I did the first Say Their Names Memorial here in Portland on Juneteenth. And it's funny how it started because it was so random, but we had been protesting, we had been marching for a while there, and a couple weeks before Juneteenth, one of the rose growers here in Portland, Tangled Roots, contacted me, and she was like, I have these incredible roses and I don't have any weddings. Like, I have all of this product for this year that I was planning to do something with, and nobody's going to use it. Do you want to use it? And so she was probably thinking like, oh, do you want to make a wedding shoot? Or something like that. And I had already been thinking about what I can do locally, like for the movement. And so there was this organization here in Portland that was leading these like sometimes more than 10,000 person marches. And they had a plan. So I contacted them. I just told them, hey, I'm an event professional. Like, do you ever, like if you ever need anything, I can help like produce something. I can, whatever it is, I'd love to help. And they said, well, we're taking over a bridge. And we're going to do like that Black Lives Matter on it, like in paint. And, maybe you can do volunteers or whatever. And I started thinking production, and I'm like, well, what if we made, what if we did something, and what if we did something that reminded this large group, this huge group of people who continually march, why they're marching? Because I was so worried that the momentum that the movement had would die down, because it happens, right? And so I thought, well, gosh, what if some way on this bridge I could create this memorial that like had the faces? Because we're always saying people's names. They're like, say her name, and then we say it, but we're not connecting that to a face. So I was like, what if I made a memorial and used these flowers as part of that protest, so that when people went through it, they remembered it's not just about George Floyd. It's not just about Breonna Taylor. There are so many people, and you need to see their faces, and you need to look into their eyes to remember. And I thought that might give people like a little more energy to keep the movement going. And so they didn't take over the bridge. Their security couldn't do it. But what I decided to do instead was like, I'm like, okay, these marches always leave from the same location, and it's called Revolution Hall. Anybody at any point of the day, if they want to do something related to the movement, they go to that big park where Revolution Hall is, and they're going to find like-minded people, and they'll figure out what to do. So I was like, if we put the memorial up there, maybe we print these pictures, we laminate them because it's Portland, and put them up, and then do one huge bouquet of gorgeous flowers, not just like the cheapest flowers we can find, but these garden roses that sell for a lot, that are just beautiful and show how much, and how important these people's lives were, and how important it is that we're doing this to remember them and remember why they were taken. So we did that on Juneteenth. And to get ready for that, we needed to find names of people, and we picked out exactly the fence we wanted to do it on, and we figured out how many names we would need. And then we started researching online, like police lives lost from police brutality, or people shot by the police. We were specifically thinking about Black people, because we wanted to show how systemic racism has affected the Black community. But there was no database. There was no place you could go to find all this information. And so it took a group of like 5 of us a week to be able to find like 176 names, and then find their pictures, and then get them all printed and put them up. And so after we put it up, I thought, why would I just keep this PDF of all these names and people when I could easily just say on Instagram to my friends and followers, if you want to use this and you want to do the same thing, if you have similar interests, I'll just email it to you. And then all you got to do is go and find some floral friends and some community members and do it. And that will be the catalyst for this conversation in your community about systemic racism. So I did that, and my friends in Dallas were one of the very first to say we want to do it, and they did. They put it up in an area called like the Parks District in Dallas, which is very, very affluent, very conservative. They chose that for a reason. It wasn't where neighbors would want it. And I think within like 30 minutes of it going up, they had neighbors out there like screaming and saying, take it down immediately. And the truth is they didn't have a permit to put it on the fence they put it at. But it's a memorial. It wasn't like political. It didn't have any sign. There was nothing like political about it. It was just faces. It didn't even say these people are gone. And so they got a lot of backlash. So they did have to take it down, and they did put it somewhere else. But since then, we've had about 25 go up around the country. So New York, all the way out to New York and up, down, I mean, just all over the place. And after this more grassroots style memorial, we decided here in Portland that we wanted, once it kind of came with the movement. So it was like once people stopped protesting and leaving from Revolution Hall, when the feds came into town and they were at the Justice Center, which was a big thing, and people were out there every night and they're being gassed, I had that same feeling like, let's remember why we're here. Let's remember what we're doing. So we decided to build a structure that we called the Injustice Center. And then we had 216 pictures that we put into that. And it was kind of like the frame of what a justice center would look like, or a courthouse would look like. And then we used the sides. We did like a play on windows, but we had like the pictures of people as those window frames. And we set that up where the Wall of Moms, who became very famous, and all sorts of other people would start from and march up 2 blocks to get to the federal building to protest every night. And so that kind of just took the memorial to a different level. It was more of a monument sort of looking thing. And after that in Dallas, they created another really cool building type thing, fabrication. This is all these wedding professionals. So we're all like, ooh, how can we make it better? And so they made these really gorgeous black columns, and they had this incredible sponsor who was able to get them into a park called Clyde Warren Park in Dallas. This was just 2 weeks ago. And they got so much publicity because Texas is, I mean, I'm a West Coast girl. I don't have any idea how it is down there. But I found out pretty quickly, and so they put it up in Clyde Warren Park, which is definitely not a place it normally would have gotten to. And they had more than 10,000 people view it. It had more than 10 million impressions on social media. Like, it went viral. And as a result, we just thought, gosh, why don't we keep doing this? Why don't we see if there's a way that we can tour this to big cities around the country, and we keep these grassroots memorials for schools and churches, but then do larger exhibit type memorials for big cities and communities, but along with them visiting the memorial, ask that they facilitate conversations. So they bring in mediators and people who can facilitate actual conversations to happen in the community for people who wanted to go to the memorial and people who aren't happy that it's there, so that the memorial isn't just this experience and then you're done. It's like, okay, what do you do afterwards? So that's kind of the short/long version. But I started a site. We've got a website, and we've got all the photos that we have of all of these people there. We now take submissions. And so unfortunately, we've had many family members contact us and submit people who we didn't know about. We have a group of writers now who are contacting those families and doing bios on all of these people, so that we're not just assuming that what we find in the media is fact.
Are you doing press for this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I am not great with press, but we did do some press for the Dallas one, and as a result, we're learning. Even this Saturday, we have 3 events happening across the country, and so we got our act together, and we have press releases for all those, and we've been sending them out. And internally, we have photographers and videographers come, but we are trying to get local and national media to these just so people realize, the important thing for me in the beginning was that they realized this is a community who are dealing with something and they need to talk about it. And it needs to not just be, these are big issues and we have to talk about them. And so it is important to me that the media sees that this is like their community. It's not us in Portland saying do this. It's like their community is saying this is pressing and this is urgent. And by speaking, by doing this big community thing, I hope their media, is showing the rest of their city that like this is something that has to be talked about and we can't just watch it on TV. We need to deal with it together.
There's a quote I love that, and I'm paraphrasing it, that basically says the same design that is used to sell products can be used to change the world.
Yeah.
And I think it's a real testament, not just to having the photos so that people remember names with faces and have that visual of why we're doing this, but using those more expensive flowers and using that really beautiful design that normally would be at a luxury event.
Exactly. Yeah.
It also shows the public that these people are worth the nice flowers. Exactly. Their lives were worth those nice things. They're worth taking the time to come up with a good design.
Yeah.
And all of that. And people notice and remember pretty things. So it is more impactful if it looks good.
That's exactly how we feel too. That was super important to me. I didn't want it to be cost prohibitive for any community to build something like this. And it is. I mean, we did it with all volunteer work and with a small GoFundMe campaign, but some of these things are expensive, and so that's why we still offer these photos to communities to make the more grassroots style. But that's exactly why also we want to make sure that we can find a way to take these memorials and travel them so that those nicer exhibit style fabrications, can get across the country and be seen.
One of the things I've been thinking a lot about when the news came about, Breonna Taylor and her killers getting off scot-free, basically, is that it was at home. One of my design philosophies for my home is that it be a place for anyone who walks in the door to feel just immediately like they can leave whatever outside and they can just be themselves. And when they leave, they feel a little lighter. So I do like that, I have it filled with art that I like, that I find inspiring. I have it with things that I find pretty, but I also tend to have more neutral colors because I find that calming personally.
Yeah.
So when people come over, I, am trying to foster that sense of this is a calm place. And I just keep thinking about the fact that home is a refuge, right? And she was killed at home.
Yeah.
I just, it's fucking me up. Like, I just can't.
Yep.
It's really the place at the end of the day that's supposed to be safe and protect you.
Exactly.
And they just.
Exactly.
It's really hard. And I'm white. And I know it's even harder for you and my Black friends who this is a reality.
Yeah.
This is a reality. And I'm really grateful that you're doing the Say Their Name Memorial and that it's taken off and that you're applying that sense of design to it, because I do think that design can be written off as frivolous, but it has the power to make people feel valued and seen and appreciated and noticed and important that you took the time for them. And it makes an impression. And I do think what you're doing is world changing, even if it maybe doesn't feel that way day to day. And it just feels like yesterday was another gut punch.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. And there's a lot of work we need to do in November and past. We were so lucky in Dallas last week to have Lee Merritt, the attorney who represents a number of families whose loved ones are in our memorial, speak. And he was speaking yesterday. He said, we didn't get justice for Breonna the way we wanted it, but it's still possible. And it's about our executive. There are some things we can still do, but we need to make sure that we bring this home in November. And so, I think it's it doesn't start or end with justice for Brianna. You know, it's been going on for hundreds of years, you know, and I think we know that we have to be in it for the long haul, and there's going to be setbacks like this, but we can move forward as long as we keep the momentum up and we don't give up. And so yesterday was hard for a lot of reasons, but it doesn't make me lose hope. There's still hope. There are more people thinking about this and fighting for this than ever, you know, and so we're gonna keep moving, and we're not gonna forget about her, and we're not gonna let it just end with this. So I'm not losing that hope at all, and I hope that her family and that other families don't also.
I think you embody what I call authentic optimism, which is this is the way the world is. These are the policies and regulations and laws that are shaping the way it is, but here's how we can change things, and we're going to work towards that. You know, it's authentic optimism isn't a Pollyanna. It doesn't pretend everything's great.
Yep.
But it does say, here's how things are, and here's how they can be, and we're going to work towards what can be.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. That's kind of you.
I mean it. I'm going to assume you signed some sort of confidentiality NDA agreement for Jonas and Sophie Turner.
I did. Yes, I did. There's certain things that they made public, so those are fair game.
Right. Well, my question is not really about their wedding at all, but about NDAs, because like we were talking about, I do think that clients spending higher amounts in the next couple of years are going to get stricter about NDAs because they don't want it leaked to the press, especially if the recession piece of this continues. And for people who have never had to navigate that and depend on all their work to be marketable and use it for marketing, can you talk a little bit about how the NDAs impact your business? And obviously with that one, people do know you were the planner. Like there were some things that the couple released, which is great. Sometimes people don't know it all. Yeah. And if you're getting paid, who cares is my take on it. Like, who cares? Yeah. But for people who are very dependent on being able to use every event they do in their marketing, how do the NDAs help that, and how do they hinder your business?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head there when you said that. I mean, in the cases where, like Joe and Sophie, in the case where there's something that they agreed that they would release, and that allowed us to say that we did it, that's great. To be honest with you, it's like at this point, so I made the decision to stop planning probably a couple years before I actually did it. and so when
I remember because we were talking about you doing that in Johannesburg at the end of like 2017.
Exactly.
And then you made the change at the end of 2019?
Correct. Yes, I did. So I think when they contacted me, I was like not wanting to take any more. But then of course it's like, of course I'm going to, you know what I mean? Of course I'm going to take it out and go out and you know, whatever. But so with them, it was like, they said they were pretty honest about having the wedding, and they had one official picture that got out. But for me, as a designer now, somebody who's 100% design, I wanted to show the world what we worked so carefully on for so long for them, because they, all sorts of people have different, different priorities, but they cared so much about design, and we just clicked so well, and it was so awesome. And it kind of stinks not to be able to share that. So in that case, it was nice to say that I did it. But in other cases, it's that same sort of thing. I mean, it's not even being able to say the client's name. That's hard. And you mentioned this earlier, but it's like, in some ways it's hard because I think a lot of potential work that you could have would come in as a result, or that people would just feel like they were making the right decision because so-and-so used you. But on the other hand, you're right. It can also make you look like you only do million+ weddings. and people can feel so intimidated, even if they know your pricing might work for them, they can feel so intimidated by something that they might not approach you. And then also, if they've never seen you or met you in person, they can get this idea that you personally, you might be this like very unapproachable, person to work with, when in fact, I shop at Goodwill personally. You know what I mean? Like, I don't wear Louboutins to weddings. Like, I have never owned a pair. Like, that's just not me. And even though I've had many clients who, are the face of Sophie's the face of Louis Vuitton. I mean, there's like, even though they're that, or they're seen as that, it doesn't mean that that's what I am and that that's the only thing that I do. And so it's up and down, to be honest with you, because you're totally right. There's a lot that I could show that I think would bring me certain types of work, but I don't ever want to just work with people because they have a lot of money to spend. And
Right.
I'm never going to like throw caviar and diamonds at everything. That's just not who I am as a person, and it's not who I am as a designer. And so in some ways, maybe it's okay, because I want to work with real people who care about genuine interaction and being present in their events. And the truth is, these things cost money, so they have to have a certain amount of money, but it's not about having the most money or spending the most money. It's about prioritizing, and maybe that means you've got less guests or whatever it is. But so I don't know, I'm like, maybe it's back to that optimism thing. I want to look at it as a good thing, that in some way I hopefully still look approachable to people, and they don't ever expect that I'm that type of planner who walks around in heels and like doesn't pick up heavy boxes. Like, I do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's another discussion.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think some wedding pros have gotten in their heads that they're the celebrity at the event.
Yeah, and then there's a place for that, right? I mean, there's some people who maybe don't do as many events as other people, but it's all kind of about that like influencer kind of situation. And that's kind of how some people bring clients in, by like their dog and their shoes and their husband and their house and their car and their workout routine. That's another thing. And I'm not going to pass judgment again on that, but that's not me. So
I think from a business standpoint, that approach to branding is unsustainable.
yeah.
Because again, during a recession, those people look out of touch. I have a lot to say about personal branding and how it's detrimental to long-term business success.
You hit it on the head. I don't ever want to be, if I'm known as a celebrity planner, I don't ever want to pigeonhole myself like in that way. So that's like the only thing, because that's not why I'm in this. I genuinely love to design. You used a bad word, so I love to use bad words. I'm using the out of things. Like, I just love the out of that. That's what I love to do. And so the person who appreciates that is never always going to be the celebrity. That's never going to be what it is, or the person who has a bunch of money. I mean, sometimes it's not going to be. And that's that. I think when at the end of every season, I would have this existential crisis where it's like, I just make pretty things for rich people. Like, is that all I'm doing with my life? And then I realized, and especially now with COVID, like, celebrations are like the opportunity for family and other people to come together after they maybe haven't for a long time. And like, that is actually crazy important, and maybe even more important now than it was before COVID, as a result of not having been able to see each other and people appreciating like the fragility of life. So yeah, so the NDAs aren't getting to me. I just want to work with people who appreciate what I do, and be able to help them like set the atmosphere for like this beautiful, genuine interaction, amongst them and their important loved ones. So
as far as the NDAs and not being able to show work is concerned, at the beginning of your career, you did a lot of styled shoots to show your ability, so people would trust your design sense and see that you could do this. Do you still use styled shoots as a strategy when those NDAs prevent you from showing the real work?
Good question. That's funny, because in some way, yeah, I've considered like not exactly replicating something I had done that I was really proud of and like wanted to show, but like a version, or just to at least show like the idea and the creativity. But that said, I haven't really done too much in terms of styled shoots recently, more just because I do a lot of campaigns now. And so I have the ability, and it's not usually event related. So it's not like a campaign is like a shoe campaign is, for instance, like, make me this beautiful tent. That's never going to happen. But, there are other ways that I can show creativity through those campaigns, production and design for those things. And so I've tried to funnel it that way. The other thing is just time, right? And so it's not to say that I don't ever do shoots. I definitely have and do, but I usually want them to be like for a particular reason or thing. And there are other avenues that I've found more recently that allow me to do that, which has meant less shoots.
I think NDAs can be tricky sometimes because you get your first big NDA client and you have that sense of like, oh my gosh, I made it. Yeah. And then you're like, I worked so hard on this and I can't tell anyone.
Yes. That's that feeling of like, what's that phrase that people always say? If a tree falls in the wood and nobody hears it, did it make a noise or whatever they say? It's basically like that,
Yeah. If you planned a party and there were no pics on Instagram, did it happen?
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's that sort of
thing. Are you working?
Exactly. Are you actually doing anything? Or are you just making food that you're showing on Instagram? It's a whole thing. And I think a lot of people are dealing with that right now, like not about the NDA, but just about like, I have nothing to show because I haven't done anything the whole year. So what do I do and how do I stay relevant and current, with not having any new work? Like, is it about my home? Is it about my, what I'm doing in the community, and then maybe also just motivation. Like, how much do I push myself to do flat lays so I can put something on Instagram, and how much is that going to resonate with my followers? Because what they're thinking about right now is likely what I'm thinking about, but not showing, which is what's happening in our world and what's happening at home. So it's kind of weird to have this disconnect and try to show what you did, what people loved so much from you previously that you kind of are not thinking about right now.
The last question I ask everyone is, what are you most looking forward to?
Gosh, that's like a genie in the bottle kind of situation. I guess when it comes to work and events, my hope would be that as a result of what's happened this year, people realize that smaller events give them the opportunity to have more meaningful interactions. And as a result, events are smaller, but maybe also that they're more frequent. So they're not just weddings, but they're like family reunions and kids parties, like you talked about, and other parties. And that they want those, they want to be present in those. And so they hire professionals to make that happen so that they can be present and part of that. So I guess my hope is that I have the opportunity to have, to be part of those things with people, which I think takes a little bit of the show out of things. It's like, if you do one big thing, like a wedding, for instance, then of course it's going to be this big whatever. But if you do that and then you do dinner parties and you celebrate these other things, then all of them can be special and don't have to be these big, huge things. And so my hope is that the world, in our event world, is able to see that happen kind of naturally, and that people now appreciate professionals helping them with things as a result of knowing that things change and that they need professionals to guide them through stuff like this. So yeah, I want to work again. I want to work. I'd love to work. I hope I get to work. And I want to have the time to do these other things too. I want to have the time to use my creativity for social justice and for good for the community as well. So it's a two-part genie wish.